here we go on this Wednesday afternoon. Have you ever been by like an apartment complex or a place that's building new homes and it's like a gated community or some business? Come in, we're opening for business. There must be a sign out in front of Baylor University when it comes to their football staff. They filled a role today, and yet Paul and Craig, another one open.
Yeah, Baylor hired Mason Miller, who's been a coaching veteran for 25 years with Mississippi State, Tarleton State. I mean, a lot of different places. Worked for Mike Leach. And so they got their offensive line coach, which was only about a 2 to 3 day turnaround. So that was good that they got that locked in. But as soon as Mason Miller walks in the door, defensive line coach Dennis Johnson making big moves, going to the Baltimore Ravens out the door. So now they've got to hire a defensive line coach.
Yeah, it's been a brutal couple of days for Dave Aranda, who's trying to save his job with their performance next season. That's the implications. That's the indications anyways, is that they've got to have a strong season to keep this train going as it has been the last 4 years. And so you lose two guys to Alabama yesterday. And I guess, was that Monday maybe? Was that Monday that actually happened? So you lose two assistants just when you had finally finalized your staff. They both decided to go to Alabama and join Kalen DeBoer. Okay, you turn right around, you fill one of those spots quickly with Mason Miller, as Paul just pointed out. Still need to go grab an inside linebackers coach to replace Christian Robinson, who joined Chris Kapilovic at Alabama. And before you can finish that second spot, and granted it's only been 2 days, now you have another job that you have to go and fill, and it's a guy who's been on your staff since you first came to Waco, in Dennis Johnson, who joined you from the staff at LSU when you first arrived here. And so was not expecting the NFL to come calling, quite frankly. I was pretty surprised to see that the Ravens were hiring him, but, don't know what had been going on behind the scenes as far as conversation. So congratulations to him. I mean, to go coach defense for the Baltimore Ravens and John Harbaugh is a huge step forward in his career and a great gig. But, man, didn't see that coming, and I wonder how much Dave Aranda could have seen that coming, and here's one of his original hires that's now also out the door. So that's the third coach in 2.5 days that has now left since they solidified their coaching staff. And, it's a mess right now.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. He has a staff that other people wanted. That's the way to look at it. The other part of it is you wonder how much of the uncertainty with Dave Aranda after the last couple of years, if other coaches either on staff and or looking at those opportunities. But Mason Miller's got a pretty good resume. In fact, a good one. I talked to a couple of coaches who said, yeah, Mike Leach loved him. He moved out of Mississippi State. I think 1 year they were second or third in the SEC, 1 year in the top 20 when it comes to offensive line run game production. And then at Tarleton State, moved back into the state of Texas. So Mason Miller, he's now the offensive line coach. Now you have a defensive line coach opening, and the linebackers coach, of course, that moved on from earlier in the week. So there we are with that.
You can use the business reference to say what you said there at the top, and that's all fine and valid. But when you say, well, there's a couple ways of looking at it, and one of them's, well, he hires great people. Well, that doesn't keep you in business. Just because you hire good people doesn't mean that the doors stay open, because if you can't keep those people or amplify their talents while they're around and make some good money or sell some great products, then it doesn't really matter. Then you go get hired to go be a hirer somewhere else, but you're not the guy at the top of the food chain. And so, yeah, Dave Aranda is obviously hiring very talented people, but one of them never even coached it down here. This one, in Dennis Johnson's case, had been around since the beginning. But, yeah, I mean, that's really putting lipstick on a pig. You're right, though. I mean, he's obviously hired some people who other people want, but, man, that's not helping his cause at all, because that's not going to be a thing where at the end of the year, if they've won 4 games, Mack Rhodes is like, we haven't made a bowl game in 3 seasons, but, man, you really can hire some really strong people. That's just not going to cut it. So, man, I feel for Dave Aranda, because you just thought at the beginning of the week or maybe the beginning of last weekend that you had finally solidified everything and you could take a deep breath, and 3 coaches have left in the time since then. So that's terrible for him and continuity.
I got to throw this in there. Mason Miller was at McMurray at one point. You know who he recruited to come play for him? T-Rex. T-Rex. He goes, I could have gone to play football. I could have gone to Baylor and spent the same amount of money as I spent to go be at McMurray as a non-scholarship football player with Mason Miller. But so there's the backing.
Here's the thing.
Not Mike Leach, but T-Rex.
I'll tell you, if he didn't have that Mike Leach on his resume, I might be calling Dave Aranda and be like, you sure you want this guy? What a T-Rex.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So a lot of change. And some of the comments in the chat are, again, the instability of the future. I am going to look at it both ways. I think that, you're talking, by the way, Kapilovic was getting good money. That's a nice chunk of money that Mason Miller getting some of that, and I don't know his deal. We may not know that for quite some time. But the others moving on, it's just more of a pain in the ass, honestly, than it is anything else. You got to go find somebody else, and you wonder how long it will take. They turned around the offensive line coach with Mason Miller very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I just don't believe either that the more you hire after hire that you're getting better and better guys. I don't think that it works that way necessarily. I think you start off with your top candidate and the guy that you really want, and then you go from there. And so Chris Kapilovic was obviously a stronger choice than Miller was. And so, that's going to be a spot that's very important, and hopefully he can come in and grab the reins. Obviously, he has no shoes to fill, really, because the guy he's replacing didn't even coach here when all was said and done. But, yeah, for the other two spots, very curious of what Aranda is able to pull off. But I think everybody around the Big 12 and for those around the country who even pay attention, because they're not a hot brand right now, unlike in years past. But for anybody, watching, I've seen several commenters from just around the Big 12 like, geez, Louise, he can't catch a break down there. And so, it's been a wild little ride for Aranda here this offseason, and he's, I'm sure, just wanting to get to spring ball, but shoot, you got to hire a couple coaches before you get there.
You still do. You have to hire the linebackers coach, who will be under the tutelage of Dave Aranda, who is the defensive coordinator. He's the head coach, and he's also in charge of the position group of the linebackers. So that whoever you bring in most likely will be a younger type coach, a recruiting type guy. You always want all of them, the 10 of them, to be that way. I have no idea about the defensive line.
And to be clear, because you keep repeating linebackers coach, Christian Robinson was the inside linebackers coach, and Dave Aranda was going to coach outside linebackers. No, Caleb Collins coaches outside linebackers. So
Aranda was going to just have the whole position.
He's going to be a part. So does he take that on? And then that begs the question of, and I know we don't drag this on forever, but how much is a head coach going to put on his shoulders? So you're going to be the head coach, you're going to be the defensive coordinator, and you're also going to coach linebackers potentially to some extent. I'm sorry. I know coaches dabble with position groups and keep a focus, but
Nick Saban always coached the cornerbacks.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's all
he also wasn't
the
D coordinator.
No, he wasn't also calling the defense. It was just, there was never going to be a cornerback coach that he could ever hire that could do it like he did, and he wanted to keep his, he wanted to keep some skin in the game in that. So but it also, how much can a head coach take on under the gun like he is?
Right.
If Dave Aranda is coming off an 11-2 year and had to step into this for a year, I don't think we'd be like, well, he's going to do it and then he'll figure it out on the back end, but this will be fine. But when you're coming off a 3-9 year and you've been given ultimatums, then you have to take on more. It doesn't help.
This does not mean to sound cold-blooded, but obviously there was a problem. He was the head coach who did not spend much time on defense because he was the head coach and Palad's a young defensive coordinator. He understood that he had to get more involved in that, brought in an offensive coordinator who has been a head coach in Spavital. But this has got to be just more than anything. It's annoying. What? I don't know how much smoke inside the building. I think coaches all talk. But this one, again, today with Dennis Johnson now headed to the NFL, I think you can look at it again both ways. But you have two openings. Spring drill start in a month. And so now we'll see. However, when you have the network that he has, I'm sure he's already received, because it didn't take long. Mason Miller, that's 3 days after Kapilovic. But when you have a Gary Patterson who's on the staff, who knows, along with the coaches that are on the staff now and others, I'm sure he will get plenty of people who will contact him about those opportunities, whether or not. But you're right. The Alabama staff was constantly rated, and Saban consistently filled it with coaches who were either trying to make the comeback, the rehab tour, and I don't mean that just because of addiction. I'm talking about it in many ways.
Image.
And he was a guy that handled a lot when it comes to the defensive back secondary, because that was his bread and butter from the time that he got into coaching, even when he was at Michigan State. So there we are.